Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. It's Tucker Carlson at the Real Estate Future Forum 2025.
Thank you.
So, Tucker, welcome to Riyadh.
Thank you.
Finally, right?
I first tried to come here in 1999 and wasn't able to, so I've always wanted to see the city, and I'm grateful to be here.
What took you so long to come to Saudi Arabia?
Visa denial.
But
No, I'm just kidding. Half kidding. No, for a lot of reasons, I've traveled in this part of the world a lot, and Saudi Arabia is the focus of many, many dinner conversations, in other countries, simply because of its scale, its significance in Islam. Everything about Saudi Arabia makes it the center of conversation often. And all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, everywhere you go, you run into people who've just been in Riyadh. I mean, everywhere. And that's a sign that something important is happening here. And I just was very anxious to see it. And so I was grateful to be invited to this. And then I thought, well, let's just spend 10 days going around the country and see what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And after 4 days, I've been amazed by it.
well, let me tell you, the time is now, and the place is Saudi Arabia. It's great having you here at the
Thank
Real
you.
Estate Future Forum. What excites you the most about what you have been seeing around?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. My job is basically, or as I conceive it, my job is to try to understand how the world is changing. Those changes have accelerated dramatically in the past 10 years, particularly in the last 5. And I think Saudi Arabia, for many different reasons, is at the center of a lot of it. But if you want the honest answer, the architecture has pleased me most. That's what's pleased me. So from my perspective as a complete outsider from another part of the world, having never been here, and seeing a country sort of creating a different version of itself or becoming something, in the process of becoming something, I'm distressed by what a lot of other countries who have tried to do that have wound up creating, and they've increased, again, this is just from an aesthetic point of view, but the sum total of ugliness in the world by crowding their cities with glass boxes, following the I am Pei 6th Avenue model that is such a blight on New York City and so many other cities. And I was in Tour Durée yesterday, and I was just delighted to see local architecture, native indigenous architecture represented at scale, and the absence of glass boxes. That may seem like a minor thing. It's not a minor thing, in my view. I think the physical legacy that we leave is really meaningful. I think the things that we create are a measure of who we are, of our values. And to see a project with 1 million new trees and shrubs, 1 million, it just thrilled me. It thrilled me. I hope that's the future. I hope the future is not the one envisioned by central planners in Western Europe where, people live atop each other to 100 stories crowded, cut off from nature. So I just thought that was the most inspiring thing I've seen in a long time.
So you know that Diriyah is the birthplace of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
I did know that, yes.
Yeah, and it's called the City of Earth.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, before coming here, I'm pretty sure you looked into the real estate in Saudi Arabia and how it's putting an evolution on a global scale. What are your thoughts on the scale and size of such giga projects? We're talking about The Line, Neom, Red Sea, Amala, and the list goes on.
Well, I haven't been to Neom. I was with, I've been with a couple people involved in it and have asked a million questions, but I haven't seen it. And I think that it's hard to assess things without seeing them, smelling them, walking around them. But the scale of it, one of the reasons I'm sad I haven't seen it yet, and I plan to, is because the scale of it is hard to understand, I think. It feels like we're watching the Great Pyramids get built. So I can't really answer that question in any meaningful way. But the canvas, the tableau that the Saudi government has to create its vision is amazing. It's amazing. And again, I would just say, this is the story of development globally, nations that expand their physical infrastructure so often follow a template designed by others, and in the process lose what makes their country distinctive. And in the process of that, lose their culture, their history, their sense of themselves. They lose the reason their country is different from other countries and therefore valuable. And what I see happening here, I think, after 4 days, I'm hardly an expert, but my sense is these are projects that are thoughtfully undertaken in an effort to preserve what makes Saudi Arabia different from any other country. And I think that's very important. And not just in this region or this country, but I think if Belgium were to undertake a massive building project, I think that its guiding principle ought to be, let's preserve what's good about Belgium, what's distinct about Belgium. Distinction is the thing that has disappeared from the world post-war. It's very recognizable, very noticeable, very distressing to someone like me who travels a lot. Every place is very much like the next place. And I think that that's a sin. I think it's wrong. Actually, I think it's morally wrong. But I also think it produces a sameness, a blandness, a uniformity that's sinister, actually. Why erase all differences? I mean, in my country, we attempted to erase gender differences, the most basic of all differences. And chaos was the result. But it's not just gender that you can erase, it's also culture. And so I just can't say it enough. This is not my culture, this is not my region, it's not my language or religion. I mean, it's all very different to me. So I'm American, very American, but
Proudly American.
I am proudly American, actually, and I will, I live there, I will die there, as my ancestor did. However, I am thrilled by differences, and when I go to a place that's proud of itself, is not embarrassed of who it is, and is sort of showing the rest of the world this is who we are, this is what we believe, it's not exactly what you believe, or we're a little different from you, and that's not bad, it's good.
Absolutely.
I'm thrilled by that. I love that. There's so much downward pressure that comes through foreign investment, by the way, to make your country, whatever country, the international finance community is investing in, exactly like every other country. And I think that's worth resisting in the way that you would resist any foreign invasion. That's not good. So fight it.
For you, immersing yourself in new cultures like Saudi Arabia, how does it give you an eye-open perspective, not only as a journalist, but as a human being as well?
Well, I mean, it's only by contrast that we see what's around us, right? You need perspective to understand your own country and your own culture and your own assumptions. And you don't challenge your own assumptions for the sake of it, but if you can't really be thoughtful about your own country unless you know other countries. That has been my experience. I've lived that. I know that. And I return from traveling every single time with increased frustration and appreciation for my own country. So again, I just can't stress, one of the most malicious trends that emerged globally after the end of the Second World War. I mean, there was this concerted effort, which I understand and appreciate, to prevent future world wars. Great. I'm for that. But in the process of doing that, and all the post-war institutions that arose, both cooperative UN, financial, right, regional EU, the effect of it was to force every region in the world, pretty much, to the same standard of behavior and belief. And Saudi Arabia escaped that because it was very famously pretty close to the rest of the world. So I couldn't get in 1999, just as a journalist. I just wanted to see it. No. And, it was much mocked for that. But in a way, I think that was a great advantage because Saudi, just from 4 days of wandering around, escaped a lot of those trends. It preserved what makes it Saudi and not Liechtenstein or Beijing or whatever. I mean, it's distinction. So I would
loyal to its core and culture,
as
tradition.
Every nation should. You often hear the phrase in my country, diversity is our strength. Diversity is a great thing. It's a value that we preserve and cherish. But that's, of course, not true at all. The opposite is true. Sameness is what the world cherishes. And that is a real threat. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have a slightly different perspective, slightly different language or religion. Not everything has to be the same. So I don't know. I see that as a great advantage, and I see, as a very much an outsider, I see a country that is, hoping to integrate to a greater extent with the rest of the world and to exert its authority because, there are a lot of factors that make Saudi Arabia inherently powerful, and that's It's great. But remain, true to itself, and I hope that continues.
It's one of many what Saudi Arabia offers. And this leads me to the question of the transformation happening here. It's grabbing headlines globally. So which part of the Saudi vision, from the reforms to the Giga project, really stood out to you and excites you more to know about?
Well, it's always the building, that excites me. I believe in the physical world. I've lived a lot of my life in the theoretical world, in the West, which, in many places has stopped building, stopped creating, is, I think, to some extent captive to the theoretical world. We have all these principles, okay. I'm not against principles, I have my own. Everybody should. But I also think it's fair to judge any idea on its fruits, on its products. Okay, you say you believe this, what are you making? Show me. And so I am always thrilled to be in a place where people are creating things, physical things. Again, not just statements.
Tangible.
Right, yeah, but like show me your buildings. I had dinner last night in Diriyah and just sort of walked back from dinner, slightly lost as usual last night, and I was so charmed by it.
What did you feel just walking around there and enjoying the physical world where you belong?
Well, so I don't want to reveal all my kind of eccentricities with a microphone because it's embarrassing. But I'm very angry about tall buildings. They blot out the sky. And they are, of course, the preference of urban planners for a bunch of different reasons. One is social control. If you treat people like insects, you can control them. Another is cost, the efficiencies of scale. But I would say the aesthetic cost and the moral cost of crowding people into tall buildings and the cost to the physical environment and the extent to which it cuts you off from God's creation, from nature itself, is very offensive to me. And so to walk through a brand new multi-billion-dollar project where you can see the sky because the buildings are only 30 feet tall, I was trying to explain this to a Saudi I was walking with who looked kind of confused. I was very enthusiastic about it, but I think it's really important. Keep Saudi low. That would be my advice. Physically low buildings, flat roofs.
So yeah, that energy you took from the place Diriyah. We say in the world of many, there is only one Diriyah. That's the reason why this slogan is out there.
Yes, and the fact that you're using desal to water palm trees is thrilling to me.
Amazing. Well, let me ask you, Tucker, if you had the opportunity for an interview with His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, what is one bold question you would want to ask him about the future of Saudi Arabia and going beyond that?
I mean, I would ask him all kinds of questions about the region and your neighbors and how is this or that conflict resolved, and Saudi's at the center of all of that. But if there were no cameras around, I would say, are you a little bit concerned that the pace of social change might destabilize your country? Of course, I'm not disagreeing with the social changes. It's not my place. I'm not Saudi. And in fact, I don't disagree with the changes.
It's just you're curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for people to metabolize change. I have felt that in my own life at 55. You wake up and things are completely different. They may even be better, but they're different. And that is hard. We are not designed from an evolutionary standpoint to absorb huge amounts of change in a short period. I mean, humanity emerged from the caves and then spent, 99% of our entire time on Earth in the same way of living. Small-scale farming, living with your family. So any kind of change is apt to produce some level of chaos. I mean, the Industrial Revolution produced Marxism, which enslaved half the world for 100 years. So, these are the costs. I'm not against the Industrial Revolution. I'm not against machines.
Like consequences.
But yes, there are consequences. When you move quickly, you will break things. And I think that's a fact of life. And I'm sure that your leadership has thought this through. They seem wise and thoughtful. But that would be my question, for sure. And anyone who tells you that's not true is unwise and doesn't sort of pay close attention to the human story, because that is the story every single time. So you don't know the outcomes, you can only guess, but you should be, my society is changing, so quickly I can barely keep up, but not as fast as yours is. So, I would think about that.
Have you witnessed any national transformation journey as the one happening here in Saudi Arabia with this big scale and big size and huge speed as well?
Well, I mean, I'm totally unqualified to weigh in on that. I can just tell you my experience
Yeah,
as an
from your
American who
experience.
travels a lot. And, you know, I'm really from Washington, D.C. I spent 35 years there. And, you know, there are a lot of Saudis in Washington. And they are very integrated into the social fabric of official Washington. You know, there's Saudi, as this is my perspective as an American, cut off from the world, but its diplomatic core in Washington was always at the center of things. I mean, Prince Bandar was, you know, not just your ambassador, but also for my whole childhood, you know, a big part of people's social lives. Like he'd be at people's houses for dinner, smoking his little cigars, and everyone loved him. And, you know, so the Saudis were very, very recognizable in Washington. Everybody knew Saudis. Georgetown University was, you know, hugely populated with citizens from this country. So, and then as you travel and you get older, every single place you go, every sort of affluent pocket, you go to the south of France in the summer, it's like everyone in the restaurant's Saudi and all that. And I have noticed just from being around that in the last few years, fewer. And that's interesting. And I actually, I'll take that back. I hadn't noticed that. I've noticed that in every affluent place I go, it's Ukrainians, the Hermes store, dropping $1 million of my tax dollars on purses. The richest people in the world are now Ukrainians, thanks to the U.S. Congress. But pardon my editorial comment, but it's true. But it's only in coming here that people keep saying, well, you know, people are just in Saudi more, and I think that's a good sign. You know, you want your citizens to want to be in your country. Maybe not in August, but the rest of the time.
Definitely. Well, if you had to host an episode from your show about Saudi Arabia, or it's filmed here in Saudi Arabia, what is the story you would want to share with the world about this ambitious nation and its transformation? And zoomed in.
I don't know. I mean, the rest of the world has perceptions about this country that, you know, it's not my job to dispel. I'm not, you know, I don't work for the Saudi government, but I would say the experience of being here is very different from the understanding that people have of the country. And I would recommend to my many children, you know, you think you know about a place, go visit it and make your own decisions about what it's actually like. I think it's essential. I think travel is the most broadening experience that we can have. And I've really encouraged it among my children, people who work for me. So, from my perspective, the most powerful agent of change that Saudi Arabia can employ is its new airline coming this year. I really think that's
Riyadh
meaningful.
Air?
Riyadh Air.
Riyadh
Yeah.
Air, yes.
I
It's
do
gonna
think
launch
that.
by
It sounds,
2025.
look, I think the obvious, as I've already said, I think the obvious things matter. I think we're way up in our heads in our theories most of the time. If you want to change the way people understand your country, plant 1 million trees. If you want people to come see your country, build a great airline. And there's nothing, I've spent an awful lot of time in your neighbor, in the UAE. I've been going there for 25 years. And I first went there, you know, weeks after 9/11. I was in the Emirates. And to see the transformation there, as you're all very aware, has been remarkable, but not just to the physical landscape of that country, but to the perception of that country in the West. And what drove that? Well, many factors, but Emirates was a huge part of it. It's easy to get there. It's pleasant to get there. And if I were in charge of, you know, if I were involved in your government, I would say, if you want to change the way people feel about our country, have them come here. And Saudi Arabia in the United States is still perceived as kind of far away, hard to get to. Can I get a visa? Can I go there? How do I get to Saudi Arabia? You know, if you have direct flights on a great airline from JFK, it takes about a year for all of a sudden everyone to want to come to your country. Maybe not even. I think it's that simple. I think a lot of things are that simple. I think that's a huge change. And by the way, I think Saudi is a great airline. I'm not against your national carrier.
But I get you. Just to have, you know, more options to make the journey very seamless for all the tourists wants to come from.
Well, the funniest thing about this region as a travel hub, I mean, of course, historically it has been a travel hub, right? When caravans were the means of trade, I mean, of course, that's the basis of this region. But in the jet age, it really was kind of a delayed reaction. It's like nobody has a map. If the world is dividing into rival power centers, east and west, and you occupy land between them, I mean, what? You know, it's just such an obvious place to have a global hub.
Yeah,
and
I get you, but trust me, the national aviation strategy is really ambitious, and it's focusing on that gap to fulfill the high demand.
Well, I think it can create a high demand, actually. And the fact, look, I believe in geography. I love maps. I think your physical location, your presence in a place physically, again, not just in your head, but where your feet really, really matters. And if you have massive undeveloped coastline on the Red Sea that kind of no one has, well, wait a second, you know, in the rest of the world, that's considered, you know, one of the greatest assets after energy that you could possibly have.
True that.
Well, of course. And so even someone who travels a lot and has always traveled a lot, like me, you know, how much coastline does Saudi Arabia have in the Red Sea? I don't know. I've never thought of this as like a maritime nation or a resort nation. I mean, this is all changing. I'm going to Alula tomorrow or the next day, and I'm planning to see.
Interesting. You're going there.
Of course. Of course.
Amazing. You're going to have a blast.
Well, I can't convince my daughters to come unless I see it myself.
Exactly. And that's the best way to come and see yourself. That's a message to your daughters anyway.
Well, it's the only way. It's the only way. And it's been my privilege to have a job that has forced me to go a lot of places. And I must say, just for whatever it's worth, I've been to many, many countries, including in distress, you know, in ugly times. And I don't think there are any countries I haven't enjoyed. You know, most places are pretty great the closer you get, and they're interesting. The people are nice. The food is good. I mean, even in the middle of something awful like a war, you end up enjoying it, you know? And so I would recommend that to everyone. But having an airline that people want to fly, I mean, the sadness of the destruction of the great carriers of my youth. I remember my wife, who has traveled a lot, but, you know, like me, she's 55, and I remember she told me that she'd flown in 1 week on BA, which was the sort of airline of my youth, you know. British Airways, first class, so exciting. And then Etihad. She's like, I don't even know what Etihad is, but it's way better than BA. What is going on? And it tells a broader story, actually, about the transfer of power, cultural shifts, the end of empire. I mean, it's actually kind of a metaphor for a lot that is very sad to me. I'll just say it, as an American and a Westerner. I want American Airlines to be the greatest airline in the world. It's not. And by the way, if I were king of the United States, it would be. If there was a single...
What would you do?
Well, I would imprison any surly stewardess, like, immediately, I'll tell you that. I would. You can't have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, did I just say that out loud? This is not being recorded, right?
It's
totally kidding.
Speak
We don't
your
have
heart.
a king in my country.
Speak your heart. That's why you're here with
you
us.
can't imprison surly stewardesses. But no, look, I think getting to a place, I mean, the West had great ocean liners. Some of them sank. But in general, the most luxurious way to travel, the most appealing way to travel for over 100 years was on a British steamer, right? And there was a reason for that. The Brits ran the world. They have the biggest empire in the history of the world. And so they felt that befitting a great empire, they needed a great means of getting around the empire. And they created, you know, Cunard. And so I do think it really, really matters. It really matters. It's a measure of self-respect. It's a strategic calculation. It's a diplomatic calculation. And of course, I would argue, it's one of the single biggest drivers of tourism. Make it easy, make it pleasant.
Seamless.
Completely. Why shouldn't, if you're spending 12 hours on an airplane, again, this is my complaint in general about the attitudes that I'm surrounded by day to day, is that people overlook the obvious. They overlook the obvious in favor of the theoretical. Well, you know, we're always getting a lecture about rights, which I'm for. We have fewer than we used to. So, I mean, I couldn't be more in favor of rights. I'm an American. We have a Bill of Rights. However, you know, if your mom is afraid to pump her own gas because she's going to get carjacked, or if, you know, flying on an airline feels like a form of imprisonment, you shouldn't ignore that. You should fix that immediately. Do not treat people like cattle. They're not animals, they're people. So anyway, you don't want to hear my lecture, but yes.
I know. That's why I give you all the time just to let it all out. And
Well,
then
you've come to the right place.
Yes, exactly. You've come to the right place. And I'm really enjoying this conversation. I want you to take me through your 35 years experience in the media. You traveled a lot. You love maps. You've been here and there. What moment truly defined you as a journalist?
Well, I mean, 35 years is a lifetime, and it's sort of hard to know. I would say a pivotal moment for me was the Iraq War, going to, once again, going. It's always important, as I've said 10 times, and we'll say again, it's important to go places and see things and match what you see against what you thought you would see.
Yeah.
The reality against the perception. And, I had supported the Iraq War in 2002. I was a little confused by the rationale, but I had supported it. And then I went to Baghdad in 2003 after the invasion, and I was really shocked. I won't bore you with why I was shocked, but I was shocked. And it was very clear to me that this was not in the interest of the United States, that a lot of the justifications for the war that I had repeated on television were untrue, that I had been used to lie, that I was part of a much larger propaganda machine, that I didn't know that at the time. And I felt very bitter about it, and I still feel bitter about it, actually, because it mattered. An awful lot of people died. The United States was hurt by it in ways that still redound today, and no one where I lived in Washington would admit that. And so, I learned many things from this experience, but the main one I learned is that the media in my country, I didn't realize this, is an instrument of policymakers. I didn't know that. I had been in it my whole life, and my father had been in it. I thought I understood it. I didn't. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. That's true in this country. Your media is an instrument of policymakers, and it's probably true in every country. I mean, it is. But I didn't know it was true in mine, and that enraged me. And I think you can't disaggregate your nationality and your loyalty to your nation from your work, and you shouldn't. I'm an American. I am an American. I love my country. I will make excuses for my country. I will defend my country physically if necessary. I'm an American. However, I don't want to be lied to at all. I'm an adult man. I will not be lied to knowingly, period. And I was. And so I began to realize that many of my colleagues in the media were being lied to. They knew they were being lied to, and they became vessels for lies. And they did it knowingly, and I came to despise them. And I still feel that way.
And that led you actually to put in your Instagram bio, corporate media is dead. Were you announcing it or actually celebrating it?
I was dancing on its grave.
Okay, enjoying that?
I was, yes. A bottle of Johnny Walker Black in my hand, screaming at the top of my lungs. Yes, I was. And I think that's very unattractive. I don't think you should celebrate the death of anyone or anything. But I am celebrating the death of the mainstream media because I think it is long overdue. In fact, I think it was suicide. Look, it's a balance. No journalist says everything he knows or thinks he knows, of course. That's just the nature of it. But you cannot participate in big lies that hurt your readers or viewers, that hurt your country, again and again, repeatedly over a course of decades, and expect to have credibility or even a business. They have no business left. People don't watch them because they don't believe them. So it is a form of suicide. And I don't mourn it. I am celebrating it in the nastiest, most vindictive possible way. Because
this is like a bold statement.
Oh, it's totally heartfelt.
Okay,
it's totally heartfelt.
Yeah, I can feel that. And if corporate... Well, let me tell you, if corporate media is dead, what is TCN, Tucker Carlson Network? Is it a revenge or a replacement, in your opinion?
It's not revenge. I mean, I hope, and I'm sorry to be so gleeful about the demise of anything. I believe in creating, not destroying. I do think the world is a binary. I think this is the core of the Abrahamic faiths. God creates, Satan destroys. I believe that. I believe in dualism in that way. If you're creating, you're more likely to be on God's side. If you're destroying, you're not on God's side. God is the creator above all. That's how I feel. And so I do feel a little guilty saying this. And of course, I'm not engaged in a revenge project. I'm engaged, I think, and I want to be engaged in a creative project whose purpose is to understand the changes that we're living through, which are profound, historic. They'll be written about. They will not be fully understood for hundreds of years. It's hard to know what moment you're living in. You can only see that in retrospect. But I hope to be constructively explaining that to the people I'm speaking to. But I would say the main criterion, the indispensable quality, is honesty. You know, we are often wrong. I have been wrong. I supported the Iraq War, but the key is not always being right. The key is always being honest. If you're wrong, admit it. There's no penalty for that. In fact, you increase your credibility by admitting you're wrong. It's the person who pretends he's God and unfallible who is a laughingstock. No one believes that person. You're absurd. You think you're always right? I know that you're not, because you're a human being. And so I would say our lodestar, our guiding principle is tell the truth, don't lie. And you know, that's a moral principle, but there's also self-interest involved. I watch what happened to NBC News and CNN, which I think is still on the air here, amazingly, where I used to work, and I see that, you know, I don't know a single person who believes what's on CNN, and you certainly shouldn't, because they're liars. And the difference is, I think we know that now. I do think that. I think one of the unintended consequences of the internet is, you know, it was designed to inform us. It was, of course, really, it's been used to control us, but it's very hard to control information in the digital age, and as I think your leaders know. So anyway, we know they're liars.
You know them so well.
Yeah, I know it so well. Yes. I'm not guessing. No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, Tucker, millions do listen to you because they trust your voice. What is one thing you won't compromise on?
I don't want to be used to tell lies, as I said, because I find it degrading of a person's most basic humanity. You know, I think that. And I want to see things clearly. I mean, there is, deception is a feature of human life, of our life on this earth. You know, there are lies, and we fall for them, and we are unwittingly instruments of those lies. But I want to assess everything by its effects. In Christianity, there's a phrase from Jesus in which he says, "Judge a tree by its fruits." You can call it a pear tree, but if lemons come out, it's a lemon tree. And it's a simple concept, but it's an infallible concept. That is always true. So you can tell me that your project is a virtuous project, you're doing the right thing. Well, that's why I like going to people's countries. I'll walk around. Do people seem afraid, or do they seem content and happy? Does your country produce intact families? What's your birth rate? I mean, things like that are the measurements that I use to decide whether or not a program is a godly program or a demonic program, whether it's fruitful or barren, whether it's good or bad. And so I just want to stick to that, because it's very easy with the voodoo of language to convince people that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
But you can't lie about the fruits. If it's got lemons, it's a lemon tree.
Okay. To end this interesting conversation, because I think our allocated time is over already. And I want this conversation to keep going on, but let's culminate it with one question. If you had like 2 minutes to speak to Saudi youth, the young leaders of tomorrow, what do you want them to hear from you?
Oh, be proud of your country. Be proud of your culture. Be proud of your religion. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your ancestors. There's an enormous, and I'm saying this as an American, I'm not a Saudi, and I'm not a Muslim, I'm a Christian. But there is an enormous effort globally, which is directly related to the process of homogenization that I described earlier, where everyone has to be the same. That can only happen if specific cultures and countries are convinced that their history and their culture is embarrassing. What you're doing is embarrassing. You're not part of the family of nations. You must do this, do that. How many trans athletes do you have? Oh, none? Oh, you're barbarians. And
we don't take it that way, but yeah.
Well, you shouldn't, and you should be very wary of that, and not just on that specific issue, which is self-evidently insane, But on many others, do not allow people, anyone, to make you embarrassed of who you are, of your history. And by the way, history is filled with embarrassing moments. I mean, just because human beings are embarrassing at times. It's just a fact in every country, in every history. However, the totality of your history, of your culture, is something that you have to be proud of. You have to be proud of that, or don't live here. And so do not allow the internet to convince you that your ancestors are embarrassing. Because I live in a country where that's happened, and I travel often to Western Europe where that's happened. And the effects of it are disastrous, because it's a kind of surrender, preparatory to a kind of invasion. It's just true. So don't allow that. And again, it's not my history, but I've seen this a lot.
Yes, well, we appreciate that. And let me tell you, we're really optimistic about our future. We're proud Saudis. And whatever you're seeing now is just a very little thing of what Saudi Arabia is thriving for. Thank you, Tucker.
Can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
Whatever you do, do not give up the flag with the crossed swords and the palm tree. That is the coolest flag in the world.
Yes, it's our identity, our religion.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this bold, honest, candid conversation. You know, it's not every day you get the chance to sit with someone who's making waves in the global media. Thank you so much, Tucker.
Thank you for
It's been my
having
pleasure.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a good pose. I like that. Please don't go anywhere. We'd like to invite Mr. Abdullah Al-Harbi, CEO of the Real Estate Future Forum, to come and join us on stage. They have a small token of their appreciation, Tucker, for you, and we'd like to get a couple of photographs before you leave the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you as well, Wiam. It was fabulous, lovely conversation. We really appreciate it always.